Welcome. Welcome to the 5th Annual Autism Research Conference. This is entitled Environmental Factors in Autism, What We Know and What We Don't Know, and Increasing Social Attention and Learning. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Joe Donnelly. I'm a pediatric neurologist and director of 4OC Kids Neurodevelopmental Center, which is a CHOC UCI collaborative program. I'm proud to say that we're now in our 10th year of serving children and families in Orange County, dedicated to the earliest diagnosis and treatment of autism and other developmental disorders. I'm also honored to be representing several groups who have joined together to bring you this great morning of learning and hope, really, for those individuals and families dealing with autism spectrum disorders from many, many perspectives, since I know people are here from different areas of the community. In this time of fiscal constraint and challenge, I'm eager to mention the supporters who have come together to bring you this morning's program. The presenting sponsors include the Grandparent Autism Network, founded by Bonnie Gilman, 4OC Kids, CHOC Children's, UC Irvine School of Medicine and Department of Pediatrics, and the Regional Center of Orange County. The supporting sponsors include Orange County Department of Education and Orange County Healthcare Agency. Our corporate sponsor is Jay's Catering. And of course, the conference is hosted by Mariners Church Children's and Family Ministry. The goal of our conference today on autism research is to, number one, promote awareness, to increase knowledge, to share information about evidence-based and innovative treatments, and provide hope. We have chosen, as I said, environmental factors in autism. Our first presentation will help address the public concern for environmental factors in the cause of autism. Our second presentation is going to highlight how one can use environment in treatment. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Irva Hertz-Pachato. Dr. Pachato is an environmental epidemiologist with numerous publications and work in a broad variety of areas. Her publications address effects of environmental exposures on pregnancy and child development. She directs the CHARGE study, the first large comprehensive population-based study of environmental factors in autism, and MARBLES, Markers of Autism Risk in Babies, Early Learning Signs, to search for early biological markers that could predict autism. She has an extremely broad scientific background, extensive knowledge to bring to the puzzle of the cause of autism and how does the environment contribute to that. So please help me introduce Dr. Irva Hertz-Pachato.
So thank you for that welcome. I'm happy to be here and to address this group with the current science. And let's see. Whoops. Let's go back to the beginning. Okay, so environment and autism, it's the state of the science and the CHARGE study, and I'm going to talk about what we know and what we don't know. This is an outline of what I'll be presenting today. A little, very brief background on autism. I suspect many people in this audience could have written some of my early slides here. I'll talk a little bit about what we knew as of 2000, which in fact is when I came into this field, having studied pregnancy and outcomes of pregnancy, but not very much in child development. I'll give you a little bit of an overview of descriptive epidemiology related to time trends. I'll talk a little bit about interactions with genes. Then I'll talk more about where we are now and the study that I've been conducting at UC Davis at the Mind Institute. So what is autism? Right from the beginning, when it was first identified, the 3 domains that we even today use as our definition, our criteria, had been described, and that includes deficits in social reciprocal relationships, deficits in communication, and a pattern of restricted interests or repetitive behaviors with symptoms present by 36 months of age. It's been considered lifelong without a cure, although the real life course of people who have autism in early life has not really been well described as of now. And it's part of this cluster of conditions that we call pervasive developmental disorders, which includes all 5 of the conditions that I have on this slide. The top 3 are what we call autism spectrum disorders. And under the new DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which defines mental health conditions in this country, we will not be making the distinctions within ASD of autistic disorder, Asperger's, and PDD-NOS. So that's coming up. The diagnosis is typically made through, and there's many instruments, but these are the ones that are considered research reliable and used most frequently in research. One is the ADOS, Autism Diagnostic Observation Scale, which involves this semi-structured play interaction with the individual, with the child, where there are presses expected to elicit certain typical kinds of responses. And then the Autism Diagnostic Inventory, revised version, or ADIR, is a long interview with the primary caregiver and really tries to trace back the whole history, developmental history of the child. Both of these provide separate scores for those 3 domains that I talked about in the first slide. What we know about autism in terms of its general description, it does have a high male to female sex ratio, which varies actually from study to study, but on average it's about 4 to 1. The current prevalence estimates, and this is based on the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, they have come up with the figure of 1 in 110. That's based on looking at 8-year-olds. And so that's currently our best estimate of the prevalence. Now, historically, there has been a tendency to attribute, in fact, it was really the paradigm from the 1960s to perhaps the 1980s, which said that this was a result of a cold parenting style, that was really the cause of these children withdrawing. We know that is absolutely not the case, and that there is a neuropathology, there's a biologic, organic basis in the brain, in brain development, that triggers the behaviors that we call autism. It is highly heritable. This we know from twin studies, from family recurrence studies, and of course the recent decade with a large amount of research going into identifying genes. Now, and as I said, the neurobiologic basis is based in a lot of literature going back to EEG studies, and now, of course, we have MRI, that's magnetic resonance imaging, and functional MRI studies that tell us there's very different processing going on in the brains of individuals with autism. I'm going to just really briefly talk about some of these other aspects because I want to make sure I have time to get to some of the results slides. But California, in some ways, leads the nation, and with regard to developmental disorders, that's included. With the Lanterman Act in 1977, we mandated that every individual had the right to lead the most productive and fulfilling life, and that established the California Department of Developmental Services and the 21 regional centers with which they contract to coordinate services. 1990, the rest of the country kind of got on board with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which bars discrimination based on developmental conditions in housing, education, jobs, and so forth. There are, of course, huge economic costs, social costs to families, and a tremendous burden to the educational system. And that's a topic for another day, I'm sure. As of 2000, this is sort of what was out there, and I was looking for what do we know about environmental causes of autism. And I came across a lot of descriptive studies showing that children with autism, or adults with autism for that matter, have a lot of comorbidity, including seizure disorders, GI symptoms, a little bit of data on that. There's great heterogeneity. Some children seem to show signs at a very early age. Others seem to have a trajectory that's rather typical, and then they begin to lose skills, both social skills and language. We know that from studies using what I call administrative databases, and this would be the data that your HMO might have, or in European countries and some other countries around the world where the data on health is consolidated for the whole country and can be linked to a lot of other information. Those kinds of databases have allowed us to identify obstetric factors and perinatal factors that seem to be associated with a higher risk of autism, things like low birth weight, low APGAR scores. And then, of course, the genetic studies that I mentioned. So that's really all there was. And actually, let me go back up to the clinical studies. We also had some evidence from an epidemic of rubella, which is sometimes called German measles. There was a very high rate of autism or autistic features in children who were congenitally exposed to rubella. And that was published in the 1970s. We also knew some data about thalidomide, which was given to prevent miscarriage. It was, in fact, not used in this country, but was used in Australia and Germany. And some of you may be old enough to remember that there were children born missing limbs, whole, very deformed or non-existent legs and arms. And those children also showed some evidence of autistic features. So let me talk now a little bit about time trends in autism. And, this has become very controversial. Not so much whether there is a trend, but whether it's a real trend. Time trend studies in general are a way to kind of cast a wide net and generate clues about environmental factors, because you look at the trajectory of the time course and you say, well, what things have had sort of a parallel rise and fall, or rise, or whatever you're looking at. But it's not a very good, it's not a very rigorous way to test hypotheses. So it is, however, really useful for planning health services. Now, a number of different methods have been used to look at time trends, and I'm going to talk about specifically the California DDS data, which I think provides some very interesting clues. In the beginning, I actually resisted doing this study because I thought, you don't need to know whether it's going up or down. We've got a high enough rate, we need to find out what the causes are. But I kept looking at these claims that were made by some of my friends and colleagues that this is just purely better ascertainment. We're so much more aware now than we used to be. It's not a real increase. And it's all well and good to say that, but where are the data to support that statement? So that's why I decided to actually do an analysis and look at the data and see what we could determine. This is just about the methods where we got our cases through the DDS system, and the denominator was the census data on children ages 0 to 4 and 5 to 9. And this is the graph. What you see is there's been a steady rise from 1990 through, this is already up to 2007. I haven't updated with the most recent couple of years, but it is continuing to go up more steeply in the 0 to 4-year-olds. Maybe a little evidence that at 5 to 9 it was flattening. These are new cases in each quarter, so each of those dots or triangles represents 1 quarter or 3 months worth of data. The blue line corresponds to when we went from DSM-3 to DSM-4 and expanded the definition a little bit. The brown line is when the California DDS changed their criteria from 1 functional limitation to 3.